More than half a century after the Apollo program, the Moon is once again being viewed as a strategic battlefield where the competition is no longer between the US and the Soviet Union, but has shifted to a new axis of confrontation, the US versus China. In this context, the Artemis II mission is not merely a technological advancement, but is seen by observers as a clear signal of the return of a space race tinged with geopolitics. Analysts believe that the Artemis program reflects America's ambition to reaffirm its leadership position, not only by returning humans to the Moon, but also by establishing new standards for future space activities. However, this advantage is not absolutely guaranteed. China, with its cautious and persistent approach, is step-by-step narrowing the gap through its Chang'e program and a clear developmental roadmap. Notably, the Moon is no longer viewed purely from a scientific perspective. Many experts identify this as a competitive space for resources, technology, and global influence. Whichever nation establishes an earlier and more sustainable presence could gain an advantage in shaping the rules of the game beyond Earth. In a comparative correlation, the US is rated superior in terms of technology and private sector involvement, while China demonstrates stability in its progress. This makes the landscape of the race unpredictable, and the final result may be determined not just by speed, but by long-term strategy. Following Artemis II, many experts view this not just as a test flight, but as a step toward restoring deep space flight capability, something the US had lost since the Apollo era. For the first time in over 50 years, humans are returning to beyond low Earth orbit using an entirely new system, the Space Launch System (SLS) rocket combined with the Orion spacecraft. This is not a random configuration, but the result of over a decade of development, integrating both new technology and legacies from the Space Shuttle and Apollo programs. The SLS serves as the backbone of American space ambitions, a super heavy rocket capable of sending humans and heavy cargo out of Earth's orbit. Meanwhile, Orion is designed as a multi-mission spacecraft capable of providing life support, navigation, and a safe return in a deep space environment. Artemis II marks the first time these two components operate together in a manned mission, with the goal of verifying the entire system before moving toward Artemis III, the mission to return humans to the lunar surface. It is worth noting that NASA does not view Artemis II as a showcase success, but as a decisive test. Issues that appeared during Artemis I, particularly regarding Orion's heat shield, forced NASA to adjust the design and flight trajectory to reduce risks during atmospheric re-entry, the phase considered the most dangerous of the entire journey. From a commentary perspective, it is clear that the US does not merely want to return to the Moon. They are attempting to reset the entire operational standard for a new space era, from technology and processes to the method of combining the state and the private sector. Artemis, therefore, is not just a scientific program, but a tool to shape the future space order. On the other hand, China follows a completely different logic. Without the media explosions like Artemis, Beijing's space program is built toward a step-by-step, stable, and long-term calculated direction. The Chang'e program is a typical example, starting with orbital exploration, followed by robotic landings, then proceeding to sample collection and preparing for more complex missions. The success in bringing lunar samples back to Earth in recent years shows that China is not racing with speed, but with the certainty of every step. Alongside this, operating its own space station and conducting manned missions since 2003 shows that China has built an independent and relatively complete space foundation. It is noteworthy that they do not need to shock or create immediate symbolic moments. What they pursue is a roadmap where every step forward serves a long-term goal, a sustainable presence in outer space. It is this difference that makes the race unpredictable. The US has the advantage in technology, experience, and the participation of private corporations, but China has the advantage of strategic discipline, a factor that is sometimes more important than speed in programs spanning decades. More importantly, the Moon today is no longer just a story of science. Analysts today view this as a multidimensional competitive space. First is the issue of resources. Research indicates that the Moon may contain helium-3, a potential fuel for future nuclear fusion, along with many rare minerals. Although extraction is still far off, whichever nation gains access earlier will have an advantage in controlling these resources. Besides, that is the factor of strategic location. The Moon could become a transfer station for further missions, especially to Mars. Building a base on the Moon means establishing an outpost beyond Earth, a place that can support logistics, research, and even the deployment of new technologies. In this logic, the Moon is not just a destination, but a springboard. Finally, and perhaps most importantly, is the element of soft power. In the new era, the nation that leads in space will have the ability to shape the rules of the game, from international treaties and resource extraction standards to the management of activities beyond Earth. This is why the Moon race is no longer purely symbolic as it was during the Cold War, but has become a part of global power competition. Overall, Artemis II and the Chang'e program represent two different approaches, but they point toward the same goal: controlling the future of outer space. And it is at this point that the Moon race is no longer a question of who gets there first, but who can establish more milestones. The question of who is actually leading in the current Moon race may no longer be as simple as it was during the Cold War. If one only looks at a few individual milestones, it is easy to reach a hasty conclusion. But when placing the two programs side by side systematically, it is evident that the US and China possess very different advantages, and that is exactly what makes the situation unpredictable. On the US side, the most obvious advantage lies in its technological foundation. With the Space Launch System and the Orion spacecraft, the US possesses the capability to send humans beyond low Earth orbit on a large scale, something no other nation is currently deploying at an equivalent level. Additionally, the integration of the private sector into the space program is a structural difference. Companies like SpaceX or Blue Origin act not only as contractors, but also as engines of innovation, helping to shorten technology development cycles and reduce long-term costs. However, this very model also creates a weakness. Dependence on many stakeholders makes progress susceptible to influence. In recent years, the Artemis program has had to adjust its schedule several times due to technical issues as well as financial and management factors. The combination of NASA and private enterprises brings flexibility, but simultaneously increases operational complexity. Conversely, China chooses a more centralized approach, with an almost absolute coordination role belonging to the state. This helps their space programs maintain relatively stable progress over a long period. From the Chang'e missions to the construction and operation of their space station, China has shown the ability to deploy according to the set roadmap with few significant interruptions. Naturally, this approach also has its limits. The lack of deep private sector involvement may slow the pace of technological innovation in the long run, especially in fields requiring high levels of breakthrough. But in return, they gain another advantage: strategic discipline. Once a goal is identified, the entire system can operate in a unified direction, minimizing unplanned variables. From a comparative perspective, it can be said that the US is leading in technology and overall capability, while China stands out for its stability and consistency in implementation. These are not two advantages that can be easily converted into one another. One side may achieve great leaps in a short time, but also risks slowing down due to arising issues. The other side may progress more slowly, but maintains a steady pace that is difficult to disrupt. Therefore, determining who is leading depends on the criteria of evaluation. If considering current technological capability, the US still holds the upper hand. But if looking at the long-term developmental trajectory, China is a notable opponent thanks to its persistent and calculated approach. At a deeper level, this competition is no longer just about which nation sets foot on the moon first. The symbolic meaning of being first still exists, but it is no longer as decisive as it was in the 20th century. Instead, the more important question is which nation can maintain a long-term presence, build infrastructure, and establish operational principles in outer space. Thus, it can be said that the current race is not just a story of speed or short-term achievements. It is a test of each nation's long-term strategy.